Thank you, Sipide. Thanks, everyone. We have a panel. We have all the speakers, and we have Marcus as well as Tilde to join us. You might have probably seen them in the breakout sessions. So all of them bring different expertise to this panel. And when I was preparing for the panel, I was trying to come up with some questions, leading questions. Of course, we'll follow the discussion and where it goes. But my goal to myself was to come up with questions that I don't know the answer to. So something that I genuinely want to learn from you, and this is what I'll try to express. And the first focus, the first cluster of questions regards data, because we're talking about AI. However, the foundation of AI is data. If there is no data, AI will not work. And I'm thinking a lot of issues in AI ethics stem from what your data is. So, for example, your data might be inaccurate, might be bad quality, it can be biased, all kinds of things can happen. Then you should correct for those, but it can start from there. On the other hand, companies, and this depends on a field a little bit, have a difficult time getting their hands on good quality data for a variety of reasons. And some edge cases, for example, health or military companies, how they can only get it from themselves, and there's a process, and they spend so much effort to acquire data for training. So on one hand, it's difficult to get the data. On the other hand, a lot depends on having this quality data. There's another complication, further complication, and that we live in a reality where Europe protects their citizens' data. We have personal data protection. However, we see that global companies in other regions like the USA and China definitely use European data for training, and they have no consequence for doing that. Definitely happening. Whereas Europeans themselves, we self-censor, self-regulate, and we don't use our citizens' data. So all of these concerns come into one place, and I would like to hear your advice. What advice would you have to a company that struggles to get their hands on the data they want, on the data they need to train their AI?
Yeah, I can start if you need.
Go ahead.
Time to think. Well, this is a completely normal situation that we're exposed to every day. In the long term, I can say there is some hope in the European health data space regulation, where we as healthcare providers and also then data holders are mandated to export data, which is scary as can be, to a health data access body. So that is under construction in Sweden and other EU countries right now. We will see how it plays out, but that's the clear ambition to make data available under safe circumstances for actually anyone with a legitimate need for data. But for the time being, without European health data space, my deepest recommendation is collaboration with healthcare, because healthcare safeguards the data of the patients. I will be speaking about health data because that's the only thing I know anything about. So we will not jeopardize the data or the integrity of the patients, period. But we are happy to work together with third parties, external parties, as we do. And other under transparent frameworks. Who does what? Who's responsible for what? Who touches what data for what reason? And in a traceable way. And often when we do this, we end up that the only legal way to do it is to do a proper research study, because under the laws of ethics, we can do other things that we can under the like traditional legal framework that we're subject to, since there is an ethical
for research purposes, it's a bit different than for developing actual products, right, and putting them onto market.
Yeah, so research, in this sense, research and development is completely different things. And to some, that's very new and even hard to understand. But from a regulatory standpoint, it's super clear.
That's very interesting. Maybe for contrast, Rafia, how do you see that in telco? Is there data sharing between companies? Are there data safe havens or something like that in your area?
It's a competition there.
Tell
with
us about
other companies, I will say. It's but there is another challenge to the telco companies when it comes to the data. The equipments are not configured to gather the data for the usage of AI purposes. And the equipments are configured to have efficient and more efficient network providers. And they are so efficient now, even without AI. So, for example, our routers data, if we gather them after 15 minutes, but in the cellular part of the network, which we call the radio access network, the radio part, the closed loop automations are in milliseconds, and the longer ones are tens of seconds, right? But the data, like how will you do that part? After 15 minutes.
The latency is way too long for it.
So it's there are many other challenges on that. And then again, one solution is to do research on the data observability, so that without reducing the efficiency, we can have more data there. And then,
Okay, thank you. Kristina, you have a response.
Yes. I think that when we're talking about AI and data, there's this tendency to talk about human-based data, because that is what always is ever since the internet started and the big tech companies started gathering data and using algorithms based on humans, and also got very, very rich, right? We often, when people say data, we think about gathering data on humans, and this is the data you're talking about, which is the data on how we move around on the internet, how we do our tasks, because they automatically generate. When you interact with things, including humans, you generate data, but humans forget and systems do not, unless asked to. But there are like levels of this, right? Then you have like medical data, which is not generally gathered on European citizens by American companies, because it doesn't exist there, right? It's not something you might say something on Facebook, but generally it's not published anywhere, right? Then you collaborate with healthcare in that case. Then you have data that is not associated, at the start with humans, right? Like all the agriculture, all the energy market, all these markets where I think you can do huge things with data that is more accessible if you're in that space. You have all the satellite data where you can look into forestry and so on.
You mean public data sets?
We talk too little about those, because it's been this very American-centered, very focused, like to be rich, you have to predict humans, in a sense. So I think that there's opportunities there we don't talk about. So I also like to say something about the collaboration, because I think that that's something that everyone who's played board games know, right, that it's better to team up with someone and backstab the rest. But somehow companies don't work like that. So one of the problems we have certainly is that you could, for example, put out better charging for vehicles if you had data on vehicles, but no one will share that. And part of that, I think, is because companies are not good at data, so they don't know what they're sharing. They're afraid that they're oversharing something to someone that will make better use of it.
And you lose control over your data when you share it.
Yes, so data brokers, things like that, I think that is probably something you should look into.
Okay. Tilde, do you have a perspective on how would you advise a company who says, we have great ideas, we don't have data, there's nowhere to get it from? What can they do?
I think we have the things that I work with is of course GDPR and also intellectual property. And to get access to data, you have to ask the question who owns the data at first, and also if there are personal data included in it, and how to make it usable for your model. And it's uncertain if it's considered theft today.
Yeah.
So if you want to train your AI model on, for example, Harry Potter, we don't know if it's theft, and you have to make sure that you can use it. And I think the best advice is to have like a license or a right to make it the right way. But today it's more of a practice to scrape the internet and use whatever you want to, because
the company says, oh, if I need to acquire a license for every book I want to use for training, imagine that.
And it's like a practice to think that every kind of data is free just because it's available or you have access to it. And we have to think about if that is the way we want to see data, and if we want it to be free and available for everyone to train AI models. But I don't have the answer for that.
That's actually a really good point leading to another question I had. But maybe before I go there,
just a quick question. As an AI researcher, they always tell us, like, if you publish something like a data or something, then it's free, isn't it? Isn't that true? You
publish like everything you publicate is free. No, we have intellectual property rights. So if you write something,
it's available to people.
So Sepide has put together a data set and she put it on the internet. Is it for anyone to grab, or are there limitations?
Yeah, if you have limitations for it, there is so. Yeah. But if you don't have any and you put it out, available for everyone, free of use.
Yeah, for example, you had the example of Harry Potter.
Yeah.
And so Harry Potter movie is on YouTube. I don't know who put it there, but it's there.
Yeah.
So it's free, no?
Is it free?
No,
it's on
not.
YouTube? No, it's not.
No, it's not.
Yeah. License attached to it.
Yeah.
But practically it is just like, so if we put anything on the internet, we should assume that anyone can use it in any way. Even if we say you're not allowed to use this with this copyright statement, the reality is that someone can put it on YouTube and someone can use it.
Legally, you're not allowed to, but you should realize that if it's there, people are going to use it in reality.
Yes.
Right.
But I'd like to say one thing. One of the problems that was, when you say you have to look up every rights holder, one of the problems here that probably there's a huge expense in looking up rights holders than it is to pay for them. And that's part of the problem, in a sense, right? That we are so bad at compiling these into some kind of functioning structure. You can say, I wouldn't buy all the books. Right.
And so this is a very good segue. And I wonder, so Tilde said, do we want information to be free on the internet? We're not living in that paradigm now, but maybe in the future it could be everything accessible, free. And that is one kind of vision. And then Marcus, you mentioned European data spaces, and that there is a split now between the research and development. Is it ideal scenario? What would be the ideal scenario, for example, for medical data? If you were the ruler of the world and you construed a new policy paradigm from scratch, how would it look like?
It would look like, well, different aspects. Broker system would definitely be one part of it, like an intermediary that knows all the rules and safeguards, etc., and that everyone trusts, because trust is the bottom line of it all. So that's one part of the solution. Another part is, which I think actually might play out within the European health data space, possibly, and that is readily accessible and mandatory data gathering, as the idea is. There's a lot of obstacles and entities trying to make that not happen for different reasons, but we might end up there, and that is one of very important solutions, because that's where researchers, innovators, companies can go to safe place, a safe processing environment under transparent circumstances, and do what they need to do, and that would certainly make some ideas flourish and fly that cannot do that today. So, but the time it will take before we get there will be longer than many hope.
Okay, what I'm hearing from you are the notions of trust, of transparency, and also that maybe the principles are right, but the process could be more streamlined and more transparent as well.
Definitely so.
Yeah. Okay. Kristina, you're the queen now.
Yeah.
So what do you do?
Well, to start with, I'd like to talk about the Statute of Anne, which is the first copyright legislation written that we know of. It was based on the idea that artists and writers should have rights, not only the people who publish them and could republish them without paying for it again and again. It is based on making people's lives better. And I think that part of the problem we're working with right now is that we're trying to figure out how to take the existing copyright legislation and fit it into this new world instead of just rethinking it, as you say. And that's what we ended up with. If you ask me, I think that humans are born to share. I think that everything that destroys the sharing culture is a problem. I think that humans need to be happy and have something, either, the possibility to work or anything that gives them the equal amount of power and possibilities as you have if you are a worker.
I hear a little hint of a digital pirate in what Kristina is saying. I don't want to incriminate.
I also have a company that draws pictures, right, and drawings. Yeah. But the point is that, yes, really, sharing culture is natural. Before we had all these copyright legislations, we had a sharing culture of stories and
you wouldn't open a story, you would share it as widely as possible. That's in your interest.
So it may be in human interest that companies go well. So we have to look into, what does it mean if data is available or not available? But I think, in a sense, we have to develop something that works primarily for humans, and for companies only as a secondary thing, where we talk about whether they can, what makes companies that make life good for humans develop, right?
Okay.
One other thing is, when it comes to when you say that we have mandatory sharing, an example is the Swedish PKU register, right? Where all kids get blood tests very early, and then you can, as a parent, decide if they should be thrown away or not. they opened that one to find the murder of Anna Lind, which was certainly a very nice, you know, in one sense, a good idea. You know, you have this register, you can find DNA matches. In the other sense, many parents, including me, said no for their kids. So the problem here is not so much what we can do with all the data as what we can do with all the data, depending on who we are. So I think that the mandatory data sharing, I would love that. I would like safeguards, right? Because I don't belong to the group of Swedes who believe that everything will be perfect and democratic forever.
Yeah,
Okay,
I would like to.
That's a strong statement. Yeah, Rafia.
I think I would like to add something. The sharing is good, and the data should be shared because that, like, we will progress and we will learn a lot from each other. But then, with this comes the responsibility as well. So we should be more responsible as well. And then when it comes to responsibility, then there should be some bodies to take the responsibility to safeguard that part. So the regulation must be implemented and it must be safeguarded and protected. So together with that part, I think like that will be the way forward. I don't see it without implementing the regulation and moving forward, even if it is with the sharing part.
Okay, Marcus, a response?
And we know actually that this is what people in general want to see happen. When we ask people if they want us to use the data for different purposes, they, in the absolute majority, say yes. But they want to feel safe. They don't want to the data to be misused, whatever that is. And they don't want it to be used against them, like jeopardizing their integrity. So those are the prerequisites. But apart from that, people, I agree with you, people are made to share. That's how we built societies in the first place. And that is still mirrored in the way we approach. Then there is another jeopard close to that, and that is we really don't know what we're sharing, because a lot of people also want to share genetic data. Genetic data is like, it's as personal as data could ever get, and it could be misused as much as any data could possibly ever be misused. So there is also a literacy issue here.
I'd like to note that I'd rather have my genetic data all over the net than my Google data since I started Googling. I think that says much more about me. So when it comes to, and the one is already somewhere.
Yeah, the problem is when you come to insurances and things that can be turned against you in wrong hands. So when you ask people, patients, well, of course there's a measure of embarrassment. I don't want everyone to know that I have this problem. But the even deeper problem beyond like embarrassing medical background is that it could be used for blackmailing. I know where you
or discrimination,
where you got your syphilis, and your wife doesn't. So I need your money now.
Okay, Tilde, I would like to hear your response. You raised this idea in the first place that maybe information should be free. So should it or not?
I was just thinking about it, and if it's up to the individual to decide if it shall be free or available, and if you can ask the individual that question, from what age shall all the individuals decide for their own, and that makes the individual responsible and controlling their own data if it's related to a person, and if it's relating to a company, is the CEO in control for their data? I think it should be the person that decides for themselves.
Okay, so we would like to see more autonomy
Yeah.
in making these decisions. Okay, well, the audience, questions about data.
I just want to ask a continuing question.
Yeah.
Maybe it's not 0 and white, and black and white, sorry. 0 and 1. So maybe it shouldn't be like you want to share your data freely or not. It should be gray zone.
Yeah.
So maybe you want to share something, but not something.
But like Marcus said, I only want to share just generic data. Don't share everything, just generic. But the generic is a lot.
Yeah,
right? So
that's another thing. That what is this enough? But this is I think it's a scale. Like for example, as I said, Peter, I don't want to share my bank account information with many companies. But maybe somebody else happily do that because it makes their life happier.
So what you're saying is,
Consider it as super.
to me, it sounds like you also want to have control over what is shared when and how. Yeah.
This is the my data proposition. And the problem is the same with the 2 people sleeping in a Tesla, is that you have to have the time and the knowledge and the understanding to be able to know what to share or not. And this is a really tricky question to address. And in regard to that question, I'd like to ask a question of you, actually. And it's that, what are my rights to my own data? So, for example, if I go to hospital and I say, oh, by the way, you made a brain scan. I'd like that brain scan. I want to input it into my AI just to check, right? Generally, we don't allow that. If you look at if you have Strava or Runkeeper, usually they keep much more data about you than you can get out through the API. And that, I think, also is a data right that we talk too little about, especially in healthcare.
Chris, do you have a response? Do you know how it works? Can I get my brain scan?
You can get your brain scan and you can get your electronic health record and lab results and everything. And up until recently, you could only get that on paper. So some people wanted to extract their data, and we sent it on a file of paper.
Big binder.
Oh dear.
So and the legislation is quite clear on that matter, that the provider owns the data, but the patient has the right to access the data in the way that the provider can provide.
So it's not like the GDPR where it's machine readable. GDPR is you're supposed to be able
until recently. Maybe they have changed it. Now it's
yeah. So actually, we changed electronic health records a few weeks ago. So I'm not into the technical detail, but since everything is digital, it would be surprising if it, from a technical standpoint, could not be exported in a digital format. I presume that's absolutely doable. But there are other problems with that, and that is, in that case, we have to send it over a secure link that is according to Post och Telestyrelsens regulations on safe transport of sensitive information. So there are digital security measures that need to be in place. I don't know if Ericsson has solved that yet, but there are requirements. So,
Encryption.
thank you. We had a question here.
On data security and DNA, there's 23andMe is being liquidated, and as I'm not following it closely, but as far as I understand, they're not saying that they aren't gonna sell the data to help liquefy the company, which means that a lot of people have trusted that this will not be used for for secret things or for things they don't have control over, and millions of people send in their DNA, and now there's a huge database that is going to be sold to maybe someone that we will not be found out who will buy this.
Kristina knows all about it. I have a feeling.
I know, actually, because I shut down my genetic data at 23andMe like a couple of years ago. So
Okay.
So then they don't have the data anymore.
I don't know. I said that I'm more worried about my Google information, but I'd like to say another thing, because that's closely related to the fact that Pokemon Go was sold to a Saudi Arabian conglomerate recently. Pokemon Go has a huge amount of location data, which is also very good for predicting what to do and where you go and where you live and possibly which stores you go to and if you have a secret lover. Lots of things, right? Not only that, but Pokemon Go put into practice because they how many here knows about Pokemon Go? Basically, yeah.
Yeah.
So they have Pokestops, and Pokestops are based on things in reality, like statues or houses, right? And they wanted to remake these in their virtual world. So they had these incentives for players to scan them. So I was standing out at the passport agency when my daughter got the task to scan the nearest Pokestop, which happened to be the police house in Gothenburg, which includes the temporary prison and God knows what. You're not allowed. Scanning means taking your phone, going around the object and taking multiple photos. So they also probably have a number of places where we would prefer, same thing, right?
Yeah.
It's we have all this data and some of it's very organized and it's being sold all over.
I thought the Pokemons are evil in some way. They just look nefarious. I'm ready to ask more questions unrelated to data, but before we move on, maybe from the audience, there are some still data-related questions. No? The one is, yeah.
If I can just complete make it into a question that, okay, so this data exists. It's DNA of, let's say, 2 million people. It will now either be sold to someone, or we could say that, this is now public. I think there are benefits with so I don't think this is possible in any way, so hypothetical. But if we would just say like, okay, so this is liquidated, instead of it getting sold to something secret, it should now necessarily be made public instead, if they refuse to delete it or something, so that we at least all know kind of what data it is, rather than it being sold to someone who will use it in some weird, unknown ways.
If you sell it to someone who's a good actor, they will destroy it.
Okay, so
rather than you make it public.
But we already assume that it's gonna be a bad actor that buys it.
We assume it's a bad actor.
But a bad actor wouldn't share it like that because they would be sued.
No. But would you rather it go to the bad actor or be made public?
Bad actor any day.
Yeah?
Yes. If it's public, all the bad actors have it.
That's also true.
Yeah. One bad actor is not as worth as every bad actor. I'll be the next blueprint. No, my data is gone, right? Because it was gone before they entered into the liquidity. But I'll be the blueprint for the next virus that is targeted specifically against a group of people, which is going to happen sooner or later.
Okay, that's concerning. That sounds concerning.
Not that difficult.
So I have another topic to discuss, and before we move on,
so doctors are using LLMs as well. When they prompt the LLM, they can use the personal identifiers of patients as well. So is there any way to redact those entities?
No, so today LLMs are not medical devices, approved ones, so they cannot be used for patient-related interaction or decision making. We are allowed to use them in healthcare for other purposes, but the instruction among all authorities in Sweden is that you cannot put any personal data in there in the prompts either. So there are rules. If you do that, you can be expelled. So therefore, it's used mostly for administrative purposes. The challenge, as I mentioned in my talk, is that many medical staff are using it on their private accounts outside their public services, which is a much larger problem. actually. So
I'm also familiar with some study in Stockholm working on a synthetic data of the medical text.
Yeah, like if you are developing your own LLM, even then, if it's in-house and they use it for prompting, like even for clinical notes, there are different mechanisms where you can safeguard the privacy of patients. So are you considering those as well when you are developing your own LLM?
yeah, what we consider realized thus far is that those tools are not good enough to be scrutinized by authorities. So at this point it's not doable, but we're doing it within research to understand the hazards and the risks, but that is under very specific circumstances. So we can, again, research development. We cannot do it under development because there are no approved anonymizers on the market. And we are, even when we're doing it in research, we have automatic anonymizers, cryptography, differential privacy, and manual check on 13,000 rows of data right now. So there are 4 layers of the identification security, even though we were allowed by the ethics authorities to do it on personal data because we do it in a safe haven. So, but we're learning. That's where we are.
Have you looked at MedGemma?
Sorry?
Have you looked at MedGemma?
I guess so.
It's a tiny, one of the medium Google local models that is supposed to be for medical.
Yeah, we tested lots of models.
Well, good. This is leads us to the question of the following. So in Europe, an interesting thing has happened. People decided, a social norm has arisen that says when you develop and deploy AI models, you should do it responsibly. You shouldn't just do whatever you want. You should do it in a way that is trustworthy. We call it trustworthy, but we can call it responsible. So there is enough consensus about it. And then we have some documents that explain what this trustworthiness means, what does it mean to be responsible. But we are currently taking even further step from social norms into regulation, making this not only a responsibility, but a law, which if you don't follow, you get punished. And this is where we are. We're taking that step. A lot of things are happening. But one of the issues that has arisen in this whole process is the so-called operational gap. So we have agreed on some rules, which we agree is now the law, but what does it mean in practice? So when do I count as following this rule? When do I count as not following or violating this rule? What are the specifics? What are all these operational things that an engineer needs to know when they develop a system? And there is some ongoing work. We have standards being developed. We saw that. We have code of practices. We have documents from the commission that explain, for example, the band practices. There is a 120-page document that tries to explain that. But we're still in this state of uncertainty. What does it mean in operational terms? So I want to ask you the following question, because you're all familiar in some way with what's going on with the AI Act. What, in your opinion, are the successes and failures in the process so far?
Of AI Act specifically? Or?
Yeah, maybe we can include other AI-related regulation like AI in health or for medical devices that you're familiar with. What do you have good or bad examples, successes or failures? Who wants to go first? Kristina.
One of the failures is not relating to practice, as you talk about the operational gap. If they had instructions on, for example, set up solutions where you can map, the what is defined as AI towards specific architectures, if they had put up there's a lot of things they could have done to make it easier for small and medium companies that they haven't. So that's a huge failure. Another one is that I think that they should have started with a smaller thing, imperfect, just the most important part, and built on it, rather than try to encompass everything while the technology is still misunderstood. And the final one is that I usually say that I couldn't have found a better way to destroy the AI Act than large language models being developed. In between, they formulated the idea that we should base it on fields, like where is it applied, and the fact that it was created. And then you create something that has no specific purpose, and it becomes immensely popular, and it kind of destroys the entire plan.
It's the perfect storm.
Yes, it is the perfect storm at the perfect time for. So it is not their fault, but it's certainly that they should have realized what happened and not try to put the GPA code of practice in motion before they even understood the problem.
Rafia, you were agreeing.
I agree to that part.
Yeah.
There are good things about the regulation. I am pro regulation. I will say that yes, regulation needs to be there. AI is a tool. Like I always give the example, we have knives at home and we can do many dangerous things, but we humans from centuries know how to use it and how to not use it. And we know the consequence as well, that if we do something accidentally, where to go for the treatment, and if we do intentionally, then who will caught us. So we have the knowledge. Now I think the knowledge is transferring genetically as well. So far we have that knowledge in the humanity. AI is also a tool. It is, and we don't know how can it be dangerously used. So the regulations are important. And then there are gaps, but also it is a new thing. So it's very natural that initially there will be gaps. The standards are being developed, but then they are also a bit delayed, so that we can understand the gaps. But I will say again, it's a journey. So, and then I fully agree that they were focusing the regulation. I read the preliminary version as well, and they modified a lot from the final act was quite different than the preliminary one, but they tried to capture everything and this, and then the LLMs just like came and
rushed it.
Yes.
Yeah, exactly. So they should have like I think there could be a way to just stop and say that okay, it is excluding the LLMs, and for that we will understand it or that part. But and to me, one thing which worries me is it is creating a bit of fragmentation around the world. One part of the world highly regulated. Okay, good. We want to develop that society. Other parts, what will they use for? Like, will they move forward with innovation quickly? Big companies, maybe they comply and they can put the resources, although I see the challenges for the big companies as well in understanding everything and complying to the regulation. It's not a simple task to do it, especially when you are doing it for the first time. But for the SMEs, so it is a bit of fragmentation in the world. How we humans as users will behave when certain technologies we were used to working in certain parts of the world and then they stop working as you enter the European space.
Thank you.
But on the other hand as well, it is a balance of regulation versus innovation we also need to check for.
That's very good. Well, Marcus, in health, you've had regulation for a long time. So you're an old wolf when you look at all the situation from a side. So how does it look like to you? What successes, mistakes, failures do you see?
Well, I think it might not have been mistakes, but intentional risks. I expect many SMEs to die based on their not being able to afford the process of compliance. It will, but that will in some way contribute to higher quality, because the winner will take it all, and hopefully those winners will be well scrutinized and high quality. We don't know, but what we're entering now is the usual phase after a new law, and that's how should it be implemented and how should it be interpreted. So we will now have a period in time about uncertainty on these things, which will delay innovation and cost money. We saw exactly the same thing after GDPR, and yet as of today, no one knows what anonymous data are. And that's
Does it even exist?
Well, we don't know, because it has to go through the legal procedures and on to the EU level in order to be clarified, and that's a 3 to 5 year procedure. And by then, everyone forgot the question. So it's not interesting once it reaches a decision. So we will enter a period of uncertainty, which will delay stuff and cost money.
And we already see delays in the technical standards that are being developed in the code of practice and so on. What is the future here? What will we see in the next, let's say, year, 2 years for the AI Act? Your predictions?
I think the pause is probable. I've heard rumors about, and I think
pause is probable.
Yeah, there's been rumors about them pausing it, but I think it's probable because the situation grows more untenable, and they didn't get the code of practice together. Not surprisingly, I think that companies will not only die, but I think they will move to the United States. I think that there's already been that move, and it's just going to excavate it.
Or the Saudi or somewhere else.
Yeah, could be. That would probably be even better, because in the United States there you have other problems.
Yeah. So Kristina predicts a pause. Tilde, what do you predict?
I don't want to say that we will have the same application that we had with the GDPR, but I think if we have, we're waiting for a standard or the guideline of AI Act, and if that is formatted in a easily readable way, I think we can make it better application of AI Act than we had with GDPR. And I'm optimistic, and I want to see that we will do this better.
We'll work it through.
Yeah.
We'll push through. Okay. Rafia, what do you think?
I think, as Marcus also said, we are in the journey. So we are in the middle of the change and adoption. So that's why there are uncertainties as well. And things will become, I think, better in understanding of the act and also its implementation and all that. But on the other side, maybe there is another storm like the LLMs in a couple of years. When we start understanding this one, there might be another one. So the technology is moving quite rapidly. That is another part. But I think we will move forward with that, out of that situation. But my personal understanding is after they gave this year, after the act, like act was last year approved in May, and this year they gave the definition of the AI system along document, and then it seemed like they are, instead of relaxing the act, they are finding something. They are trying to, without changing the act, they are relaxing the act a bit.
Yeah,
I don't
the tendency to relax.
like that, but this is like my personal opinion, and I could be wrong in that as well.
That's what we do. We speculate today.
Yeah,
And I
so
want to
it's just
open also the floor to the audience. Maybe they have a question. Now is your chance to ask everything you ever wanted about the AI Act, but didn't have a chance to. You have a great panelist.
I have a question. So the question that you asked Laurynas about the AI Act had quite close answers, and they were more or less positive about the AI Act and the speculations of oppose. But I wanted to see if there is anyone, either from the panel or from the audience, who is more pessimistic, in the sense that maybe you think the AI Act will be a failure, and they will just stop it, and the EU will think, yeah, maybe we should be like USA, and we are just doing something wrong, and we wasted the resources. Is there anyone who would think that this could happen as a scenario?
Yes, I think that based on the previous experience and the situation that we had in the EU Parliament regarding to the CS3BB, Corporate Sustainability Due Diligence Directive, that the Commission and Parliament have decided to watering down, I mean, mitigate the obligation. I think that, yes, we are going to be faced with this kind of situation regarding the AI Act in the future, because the EU needs to preserve the competitiveness of the market, and in the very concrete and serious competition between the US, EU, and the China. So I think that, yes, in the future, possible.
I think the GPAI code of conduct is a total failure, actually. So I'm not that positive.
So parts of it might fail completely, others might survive as well. It can be modular.
Could also affect the implementation. We don't change the law, but the implementation of it, they make it simpler.
More exceptions. Everything becomes exceptions, so not apply.
Exactly. So maybe that would be.
Any other questions? Don't be afraid to ask something out of the box, or even what you think is stupid. We are going to answer it. What do you want to learn about the AI Act?
No, I was going to say that someone here is suspiciously silent.
Salomir, do you have something you want to learn? Really? Everything is clear to Slavomir. So with that note, I want to give you an opportunity for a last message, last takeaway from a very beautiful day of talking about trustworthy AI. I think we learned a lot. Kristina, what's your main takeaway? What's your main message?
My main message is, and I wrote this on Facebook actually, that I think that we should experiment more. We should have fun. We should always think ethically and work with how to communicate and talk about it. So we, because many of these questions are not covered in the AI Act, because it's a work in progress. But I do believe in humans, and I believe in our ability to do good things. The internet was a shining Camelot before the corporations got hold of it, actually. I believe in engineers and also lawyers, but the ability for humans to think ethically while they're doing things. I believe in creating these organizations where you're allowed to talk about, what your problems you see with your AI development, and to engage with stakeholders outside. I think that it's not as daft, right? As long as we all have the ability to continue be functioning humans. Yeah.
I also want to add on that, and to use AI and test AI and use the sandboxes that is available, and there will be more of them as well. And when integrating with AI and people, think before and be critical, and think about the human behind the decision of the AI, or that is impacted by the AI.
Okay, Rafia, what's your last message? Your takeaway?
I think I gave it on my last slide as well. We all need to work together more
Give us
to
a
make
reminder.
Society better.
Okay,
Yes,
thank
we
you.
must join hands together.
Thank you, Marcus.
Yeah, I deeply agree on the fact that we need to collaborate across knowledge domains. This is no domain can do this on its own.
Yes.
The other one notion I would like to stress is building trust in what we do, because if we don't if we as actors in this don't get the trust and are worthy of the trust, we will not have a case at all from society. So we need to build structures that create trust, also for putting genetic data to good use under good circumstances, as an example.
Okay, thank you for this message. I want to thank also Stefida for putting this together. I want to thank my panelists for a wonderful discussion, and of course, thank you all for coming and bringing your perspectives. This was a very engaging, interacting day. Thank you all.